Okay, so I've been working on several projects and almost finishing several of them. Almost. But we see the problem there. I'm not finishing the projects. And this is yet another project, but this is actually going to be the one that I probably finish first, or at least the first part of it. So, anyway, what you see here, focus. Why are you not focusing? There we go. So, what you see here is my 8mm Mauser. And these are Remington Primers. These are my Winchester Match Primers. And we're basically going to pit them head to head, but this is actually the main part of the project. You'll see here I've written down a bunch of numbers. Um, so previously, I used Dan Newberry's optimum charge weight workup, and that's different from what I've seen other people do. It's everyone has worked up a load, but his is working up in a load in such a way, and also not worrying about the group that gives you the most amount of precision and accuracy. It's paying attention to the groups above and below it as well to try to figure out something that's just going to work out great for the rifle, supposedly whatever primers you use or brass you use. So it's not going to be the most accurate, but it's going to be the most consistently accurate, if that makes sense. I'm not going to bother going further into it because what this project is about is a different load workup. And this is something used more by like long distance shooters, people who are shooting out above 600 yards, even to 1,000 yards and beyond. So what it is, it's the 10 shot workup. And I'm using benchmark. These are the Purvey Partisan 125 grain bullets. And because this is really more appropriate for that burn rate. Yes, you can use 200 grain bullets if you want. That's not too far out of the realm, but I'm going to use something maybe a little bit more appropriate. And I've loaded up 10 shots of the Remington, 10 shots of the Winchester Match. We're going to pin them against each other. And then lastly, we're going to chart the data. We're going to compare them. We're going to see if we can find some nodes with those two types of primers. I kind of like testing different products in the same video. So it's also just more data. Ideally, what I would like to do, which I don't really have, well, I do have the brass for it, but I'm trying other things as well because over here, you'll see this is not the 125 grain partisan round. This is a Sierra Match King. This is actually the last of the Sierra Match Kings. And what I've done is I've used IMR Enduron 4166 and I've worked up a load. Rather, I should say I've worked up a load with the 10 shot group. And the maximum charge I'm using is actually the maximum charge I found with the optimum charge weight load. So we're going to see how much correlation there is between doing my 10 shot load development. And yes, I have two extras here. These are just extras. These are just to warm up the barrel and just to have fun with. The rest of them, though, that's going to take part of our testing. That said, I'm going to explain probably in the second part of this video more about what the 10 shot ladder test is all about. I just got back from the range. It was just a quick little trip. I did some other errands as well. But anyway, so what I forgot to do, what I forgot to talk about in the first part of the video, was really more of how this 10 shot load development works. And what the idea is instead of paying attention to groups, you're going to be paying attention to the velocities. And you're going to be kind of finding the correlation between the data you collected. Wow, so that's a lot to say. What does this mean exactly? Well, let's start from scratch. So, step one, and there's basically 3 steps. Determine the maximum load that you're going to use. Like for 4166. Yeah, 4166. The maximum load I used was 45 because that's what I determined before. I mean, it's a guesstimate. I might be able to use more, but I'm sticking with 45. And then you basically determine how many shots you're going to fire. Well, 10 shot load development. So, and the increments you're going to work up by. I chose 0.2 increments. So that meant that as we worked down, all the way down here to 43.2. Now, the maximum charge that we used for benchmark and our 125 grain bullets was 124 actually. Was the maximum charge we used for the benchmark was 49.8. And, you know, actually just for funsies, because one thing I thought was very curious about benchmark was actually in the camera it looks fairly clean, but you can see there's a kind of a soot mark there. Do you see how it's going down the side of the case? I'll wipe it so you can see where I wiped it off. Right there. Yeah, that's come on, focus. I guess that's as good as we're gonna get. That's kind of an indicator of how light the charge was. It was almost too light of a charge. And you can see around the shoulder where there's more soot. Otherwise, it burnt fairly clean. However, 4166 definitely burned a lot more clean. Basically, any of the marking you see on there, I shouldn't say marking, the soot or whatever, that's from the redding. This stuff. It's the dry neck lube. Anyway, basically all you have to do is go out to the range, you fire them through your chronograph, log the results, and then you got to crunch some numbers and take a look at the data. Before we do that though, I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to show you at least, the state in which the primers, and you can see there briefly, there's no flattened primers. They're all pretty good looking. And let's also, yeah, take a quick look here. Okay, this one is the maximum charge, a 4166. You can see it's nothing to write home about. That's perfectly fine. Okay, now I'm going to try my best to take a look at the chronograph. This is 4166, and you're going to have to deal with me holding it. I just tried to place the camera down on the thing, and the lighting wasn't really good. Didn't really work out best. So anyway, let's take a look. And this is, there's 10 shots here, and this is working up from, actually, since this will be in reverse order, this will be from the top charge down. So that's quite the spread. That's like, actually we can see high, low, average, we don't care about that. Extreme spread, 130. So for basically almost 2 grains of difference, well, we're counting by fence posts, so 1.8 grains difference. That's I don't even know how to qualify that. And of course, standard deviations don't matter, so we're going to the next string. So now we're going from 4166, which was a 200 grain bullet, to 124 grain bullet propelled by benchmark. So string 9, there we go. So this is the maximum charge. So this is a 49.8. So there we go. And let's go through these again. Oh, and I forgot to mention for this string, this is Winchester Match Primers. And let's see what the extreme spread is, just for funsies. 200. So now, change string, there we go. And we can see here already, these are the Remington Primers. We already broke the 3,000 mark. But let's take a look at the rest of the numbers. That's quite the swing. And then let's take a look at the extreme spread. Over 200. So that's something. So give me a moment. I'm going to put these numbers into an Excel spreadsheet. We're going to take a look at those, and then we're actually going to do our interpretation. Okay, so here we are. We're basically at part 3, because part 1 is deciding the charge weight for everything we're going to use. Part 2 is actually going out to the range and recording the data, or obtaining the data, rather I should say. Part 3, we're analyzing that data. And after this, we're going to be confirming what we've discovered. We're going to be testing our results. When we take a look at this, we're going to take a look at 2 points of data that are actually fairly close. And like this one, this is our first one here, 48.2, 48.4. That's a difference of 12. Because when we look up here, 2855, 2867, that's a difference of 12. That's actually pretty good. So we're going to load up a number of rounds at 48.3 right in the middle. And we're going to go out to the range again. And we're going to test that one node. We're hoping it's a node. And we're aiming to have an extreme spread of, oof, God, you know, if you're an actual competition shooter, you're probably aiming more for like under 10. I'm almost really scared to even say that because I'm not a competitive long range shooter, but you know they're fun videos to watch and they're fun people to talk to. But there are people that go out there and they have insane standard deviations that are even under 5. It's incredible to see, and if we can somehow obtain that with our rifles, I would be beyond amazed. Honestly, my extreme spread, if I somehow manage to get under 20, I'm gonna go ahead and set that bar pretty low. I'll be happy. So anyway, we're gonna load up another set of rounds. 48.3 is gonna be one of them because we're looking for 2 points of data that are fairly similar. This could be another one. That's 48.9. I'm sorry, 48.8 and 49. Because, let's see, what's the difference here? Looks like a difference of 18. That's really not too much worse. So 48.9, there we go. Now, the thing that's very worrying is we see that before and after this node, because this is where we're kind of taking it to the meta level. I'm kind of taking more things into context. Wow, we have this sudden drop here where it's kind of scary to even start to approach any place by that. And this is actually where I'll go ahead and segue into kind of the criticism of this, because this 48.8, how do I know that this right here is the actual where it's going to be? Does that make sense? Like if I fired 10 shots at this, would this be the average point? Or is this really the high point of what this charge weight would be? Or is this one the low point of what this charge weight would be? Like, is this a false node? That's tempting. I mean, it's not tempting. That's a legitimate argument because this is just one data point, and we have to depend on the other data points to really give some sort of meaning. However, that said, let's look up near the top range here. This total range actually isn't too bad. It's, let's see here, 2949 and there. So that's less than 40 for this whole group here. One could consider this a decent node. Is it the tightest? No, but and it's is kind of up and down, but there's a lot of leeway here. Now with Remington, let's take a look here. We have a pretty significant increase and decrease here, but we have a nice nice climb here, a nice incline. So, now I don't usually load this way, so I'm scared to try to place where I would develop a load. I, I think I'd take a stab at it. I think I'd just stick with 48.6. Let's see here though. This high point here down to a low point, and then we jump all the way back up here. But this isn't quite the gradual climb, but this is another right here is actually probably pretty safe. Let's see, what is the difference here? 49.4. Okay, there is a difference of 14 here, but since the previous charge is such a drop below, like this scares me, actually. But you know what? Just for funsies, maybe we'll try it. Anyway, so let's take a look at the aggregate. So, when we take a look at the two primers, they're practically opposites, aren't they? I mean, where here we have a climb, this has a drop. Where we have a massive climb here, this one has a massive drop. I mean, putting these two together, what this tells me is that this is probably a terrible place to load. But we do see that near the top of the range, both of them are fairly smooth. And that here, I mean, this is a bit more extreme, a climb here. But they both do have this trend of just kind of going up near that middle end. So this is me with like the whole optimum charge weight mentality kind of, which maybe I should just drop that right now. But still, I think it's important to take a look at and compare these two and see that, you know what, a medium charge just below medium might be a decent place to load, but probably the best place to load really would be near the top end. So that's probably what we'll end up doing, probably from each primer type, just because we like to do that comparison. Now, before we forget, we have the big one. We've already done an optimum charge weight of 4166, haven't we? So now we need to analyze the chart for 4166. On the left here, this is the data we got from our OCW workup, the Dan Newberry OCW workup, where again, what you're doing, you're trying to find three data points where the points of impact are very similar. And then you kind of load for the middle there, and that's kind of your precision node. That's where you're finding your tolerance for your precision. And from that, hopefully accuracy. Similarly, with the 10-shot load development, we're trying to find a velocity node. Again, we're aiming for a certain level of precision that will translate out into accuracy, especially for long distance shooting. So now, let's take a look at both of these sets of data. Now, one thing I find very interesting is one of our least accurate groups that also had it had the furthest point of impact, because this distance from like where we're aiming is 3.5. That was the furthest by far, and it was a sudden kind of jump up from the previous and certainly the one after. And look here, yeah, right in between 44 and 44.2, we see that there's a pretty big climb in velocity here. So I kind of like that there's that correlation. That's pretty fun. Now, similarly, or rather I should say conversely, we see near the lower end here, this is actually a velocity spread of, let's see, 2271, 2279. So that's a spread of 8. And these were the most accurate that I had. Or, well, I guess technically that one was slightly more accurate, but no, I'm wrong. Yeah, these were the most accurate groups. And also, I did it oopsie, and the point of impact actually ended up being pretty similar for both. It pretty much overlaid. So I'm going to have to definitely try loading up charges for that. That looks very promising. And so that's nice to have all that data correlate. Now let's see here. 23, 26, 23, 35. So that's 9. And right here at 44 and a half. And that's nice because that was very accurate too. But I remember being very worried because this was 3.5, this was almost 2.5, and here we're sitting there at 2. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe we found something here. And then near, as we go up, we see a pretty big jump, but then it levels off again. And how big of a jump is this? 2376 to, so it's like what, 13? That's not bad. And that actually ended up being, I think, what we stuck with. So, I want to try this though. I'm very interested in seeing how this lower point went because I bungled this data, but also, again, the parameters for the OCW said you try to find 3 data points. I did not have this here. But I'm wondering if, because I was guesstimating, if that's what threw me off. So we're going to try that. This 43.3. You know, actually, and in, I don't want to say in hindsight, but here's where, I mean, we're only looking at 2 points, and we're looking at 2 similar things. But, you know, I'm taking a different look at it, and I was ignoring these 2. Which, I mean, I don't want to say you should, but I was like, man, just from that jump there, like, I was discounting this. But from here to there, actually isn't that bad either. And we have this continuation there. So maybe 44.4 might be a good node to try. Maybe. We'll have to test that the next range.
Okay, it's been a while. I've replaced the brake rotors on my vehicle, and also on the weekends they've been having events out here at the range, and so I like to give them space. But here, I just drove out after work because this weekend is going to be another 2-day event, so I needed to get some range time. So what I have out here, this is my continuation of that 10-shot ladder test. And what I have here is the second round. So that's one of the complaints about this whole 10-shot ladder test, is that it's not a true 10-shot ladder test. The initial round that you do is 10 shots, and after that you're just kind of taking a look at the data, and then you're going out and you're testing again. So what I have here, the first 10 are Winchester Match Primers, and then after that we have the Remington 9.5. And from the number crunching that we did before, you can see here for the Remington we have 48.5 grains of benchmark. And then for the Winchester Match, we have 48.3. I think it's very interesting that they're so close together in terms of weights. But what I did is, again, like they recommend, you find the 2 data points that are closest together. You kind of split the difference. You go in between, and then you go out and you remeasure. So I have 5 rounds here that are going to go through the chronograph, and then 5 rounds that are going to go through paper. So we're going to see how well they actually group. Because after this, there's actually technically a 3rd round of testing, but that's more of messing with your seating depth. So really, in totality, the testing the chronograph and also the accuracy, you can do that with one go. but I don't really have the setup for it, so I had to load more rounds. But ultimately, you end up loading about 20 rounds. But anyway, enough talking. Let's get to the results. Okay, so these are the Winchester Match Primers and 5-shot group. So let's get through this. So 2836, 2824, 2808, 2855, then 2789. So the high, the low, the average, but now what we're most concerned about, extreme spread 66 with a standard deviation of 25. So that's higher than what we were hoping for. Now let's go to the Remington. So we need to go all the way to string 1. So 2849, 2812, 2886, 2873, 2861. So that's a high of that, low, the average we don't care about. Extreme spread 74, standard deviation 28. So that's actually a little bit worse. So on both ends of the spectrum, I didn't mean to say that. So there we see that with this, I took the best standard deviations, the two best data points. I went in between. We got something that still wasn't too much better than something we might buy off the shelf. I'm still going to go ahead and see how it does in terms of accuracy, but this is not good. Certainly not what we're hoping for. I was aiming for like a standard deviation of somewhere under 20. And I was barely in that ballpark, barely, but not really. Anyway, let's see how the accuracy did. Okay, so this is with the Winchester Match, and I'm going to do something I don't really care to do, which is I'm going to call a shot. And I felt like my last shot did go to the lower left, and I see one to the lower left. So I'm going to say that this is probably the primary group, which isn't terrible. That's actually not bad. If we include that, it definitely turns into something kind of not awful, but definitely not what we're aiming for, literally and figuratively. Anyway, so let's see how the Remington Primers do. These are the Remington Primers. Maybe, this is a slightly different load. The difference is like a 0.2 grains. But maybe what I shot before wasn't a flyer. Maybe it was legit. These are very similar groups. They have a very similar point of impact. This one's obviously lower, but they performed very similarly, and actually that kind of shows in the chronograph as well. There's a measurable difference, both in terms of point of impact and in speeds. So, I feel like really what we found here is a very bad node for even a OCW. But for the 10-shot ladder test, part 2 is a complete failure. We have to go back to the drawing board. We have to load up more ammo. Now, part 3, rather I should say, I'm going to do another part to this, and I'm going to include some neck-turned brass into the mix. I want to see how that affects things.